let's look at this shot. The subject is not framed appropriately. The frame is constantly wobbling throughout the duration. The exposure and the white balance aren't correctly adjusted for the outdoor setting and shiny forehead. And it feels disengaged and estranged rather than personable, completely missing the original tone that was intended for it. There's a lot to criticize about this shot, and many others that I've put together, and for good reason. I'm not an expert filmmaker. I'm not an expert cinematographer, editor, audio engineer, writer, or any of the other dozens of trades that go into making videos at a professional level. I want to become better at it, but it takes a lot to become an expert that people recognize. And there are definitely experts out there that are recognizable at first sight. For example, the Blue Angels are experts at flying fighter jets. It almost sounds silly to say because it's so obvious. But there's a difference between recognizing expertise and understanding it. So let's look at what it takes to become a Blue Angel pilot. Now their website says that each applicant must be career-oriented, carrier-qualified, active-duty Navy or Marine Corps tactical jet pilot with a minimum of 1,250 flight hours. 1,250 flight hours minimum. And to put that in context, getting a private pilot's license that lets you fly your own plane for business use takes about an hour and a half of flying every week for 6 months. To become a Blue Angel, you'd have to fly an hour and a half every day for 2 years in a fighter jet through hostile airspace, landing on aircraft carriers in choppy water. There have been thousands of Navy and Marine pilots over the decades, all impressive experts in their own right. Yet only 271 of them became Blue Angels. It's a competitive, top-level position, and it doesn't even merit extra pay. Each pilot is a volunteer. So imagine being strapped to a rocket that's moving so fast it's draining the blood from your head. You're losing consciousness, and if you even twiddle the controls in front of you on accident, the 18 inches separating you and the next rocket would evaporate and turn a high-speed air show into a high-speed disaster. And you're doing this not because someone's holding a gun to your head and saying you must. You're doing it because you feel like you should. It's not a miracle that these pilots can fly under such conditions. It's a sign of true expertise. They demonstrate over and over that despite how scary what they do is, we should trust them. They've got the experience, they've got the know-how, and they've put in the time to become the world's best pilots. But for people who don't have to demonstrate skill the way the Blue Angels do, expert is becoming a hollowed-out title. America is entering a new age of expertise. It's not one backed by experience, but by bachelor's degrees. It's an age where anyone can take out some debt and claim to be a leading professional in whatever it is their $40,000 paper in their office has printed on it. The field of expert professionals is becoming one where there are no winners and losers, where everyone is just as smart and accredited as everyone else, where we all have our own unique individualized trophies. And this is a bad thing. The hardest part about it is that there's this siren song of success that we all have to resist in our lives. See, if you want a degree, you'll probably get a degree. If you need to make your resume look good, there are plenty of ways to doctor it. If someone asks your opinion on a topic that you're not familiar with, you can BS your way to an answer and still seem like an expert. There are countless situations like these where we can play into what people want to hear and slip by completely unchallenged. But that kind of misses the point. Why would anyone want to spend their life acting out the bit part of a charlatan expert in exchange for some other person's unqualified, accredited validation? Buying the trust of others with a loan on knowledge or skill is a recipe for bankruptcy. Now, I want to become better at video production, but that doesn't mean I could direct a top-budget Hollywood blockbuster tomorrow. It means I have to work to become better at it. I've got to practice the basics and play with the concepts. I've got to do more than feel entitled to skill based on a desire to acquire it. I have to want to make something for the sake of expression, not for any sort of self-validation or inflated self-worth, but because I feel like I have to do this. And this applies to so much more than putting together videos. It applies to what you do in a day job. It applies to relationships, to writing, to playing guitar, to cooking, to any area of life you want it to apply. We can either be these passive consumers of our own lives, wishing we could invoke skill on demand, like a pizza delivery, or we can engage, create, and play. We can earn our chops and make a difference in the world doing it. We can become experts as a byproduct of our passions, rather than because we feel like we have to play to some song and dance. Regardless of if I ever become an expert video producer or an expert anything, what I've learned hasn't changed. You've got to want to be better, but you've also got to be diligent and put in the work to become better. That's the only way to go from gawking on the ground to flying an F-18.